I was a successful software engineer in Seattle, with what I thought was a perfect 7-year marriage to Amanda. We had built a beautiful life together, or so I believed. Then one night I accidentally found strange text messages on her phone. My world collapsed as I discovered her ongoing affair with her ex Jackson, but nothing prepared me for the shock when, during divorce proceedings, she demanded half of everything I owned, including the company I had built before we even met. Before I tell you how I uncovered the betrayal that changed my life, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and subscribe to join our community of real-life storytellers. I have always been a self-made man. My software engineering company was built from the ground up, fueled by countless sleepless nights and an unwavering dedication to creating something meaningful. 9 years ago, at a friend's housewarming party, I met Amanda. She stood in the corner of the room laughing at something someone had said, and I was immediately drawn to her confidence. When our eyes met across the crowded living room, I felt a connection that I had never experienced before. Amanda was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Smart with a master's degree in marketing, ambitious with her own goals, and she possessed a warmth that made everyone around her feel special. Our conversation that night flowed effortlessly for hours. We discovered we both loved hiking the Pacific Northwest trails, had the same taste in obscure indie films, and shared dreams of traveling to Japan someday. Our romance moved quickly after that first meeting. Within 6 months, we were practically living together, splitting time between my downtown apartment and her cozy place near the university. After 2 years of dating, during a sunrise hike on Mount Rainier, I proposed. Her tearful yes and the joy that radiated from her face convinced me I had found my forever partner. We purchased our home in the Madison Park neighborhood of Seattle, an upscale area with tree-lined streets and views of Lake Washington. The 4-bedroom Craftsman had more space than we needed, but Amanda fell in love with its character and potential. We spent weekends renovating, painting walls together, and turning it into our personal sanctuary. The 3rd bedroom became my home office, and the 4th was designated as a future nursery, though we had agreed to focus on our careers first. My software company was growing rapidly, specializing in cybersecurity solutions for financial institutions. The demanding nature of the work meant long hours at the office and occasional business trips. Amanda supported my ambition, understanding that these sacrifices would pay off in the long run. She herself was climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm, often bringing work home in the evenings. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs that I missed or chose to ignore. Amanda became increasingly secretive with her phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. There were unexplained absences, times when she would return home hours after her usual schedule, with vague explanations about work meetings or drinks with colleagues. But I trusted her completely, never questioning these small inconsistencies that now seem so obvious. My trusting nature had always been both my strength and my weakness. I believed in seeing the best in people, especially the woman I had chosen to spend my life with. This trust is what blinded me when Jackson re-entered our lives. Jackson Turner was Amanda's college sweetheart from her undergraduate days at University of Washington. They had dated for nearly 3 years before breaking up, due to what Amanda described as different life goals. He had recently moved back to Seattle after working in San Francisco for several years. Amanda mentioned running into him at a coffee shop downtown, describing it as a pleasant surprise to reconnect with an old friend. When she suggested inviting him to our summer barbecue, I thought nothing of it. Jackson arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and an easy charm that seemed to win over everyone at the party. He was tall, with athletic build, confident, but not arrogant, working as an investment banker with stories of Silicon Valley success. I noticed how animated Amanda became in his presence, but attributed it to the nostalgia of reconnecting with someone from her past. After the party, Jackson became a more frequent presence in our lives. Amanda explained that he was seeking career advice, interested in the marketing side of tech companies. They occasionally met for lunch, which Amanda always mentioned casually, as if it were no different than meeting any other colleague. My company was entering a critical growth phase during this time, with potential investors and new clients requiring my full attention. I was often working until 9 or 10 at night sometimes, not even noticing when Amanda would slip out in the evenings, saying she needed to work late too. She changed the passwords on her laptop and phone, explaining it was a new security protocol from her office. The distance between us grew so gradually that I barely noticed it happening. Our conversations became superficial, limited to household logistics and weekend plans. Intimacy became rare with Amanda, often claiming exhaustion from work stress. When I suggested a weekend getaway to reconnect, she would find reasons to postpone. All these changes happened so incrementally that I failed to see the complete picture forming before my eyes. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday in April. My laptop crashed right before an important virtual presentation, and I asked to borrow Amanda's. She had left for work already but had mentioned she would not need her personal computer that day. When she texted her password, I had no intention of snooping, no suspicion that would lead me to look through her files or emails. I simply needed a functioning computer for my meeting. The email notification popped up while I was setting up the video conference. From Jackson Turner, with the subject line, "Missing you already." My finger hovered over the close button, but something made me hesitate. Perhaps it was intuition, or the accumulation of small doubts that had been building subconsciously. I clicked. What I found was not just one email, but an entire thread spanning back 6 months. Hundreds of messages exchanged between my wife and her ex-boyfriend, each more devastating than the last. Their correspondence revealed not just a physical affair, but an emotional one filled with declarations of love, detailed accounts of their time together in hotel rooms, and even in our vacation cabin on Lake Chelan. I read message after message, feeling each word like a physical blow. They mocked my obliviousness, with Jackson joking about how I was too absorbed in my work to notice Amanda slipping away. They discussed future plans, how they would eventually be together properly. There were photos exchanged that I could not bring myself to open fully. Most shocking was an email from 3 weeks earlier where Amanda had given Jackson the entry code to our vacation home, telling him to make himself comfortable for a long weekend, while she told me she was attending a marketing conference in Portland. The timestamps matched a weekend, when I had called her hotel room, and she had answered sounding distant and tired, claiming poor reception. I canceled my meeting, shut down the laptop, and sat in our kitchen for hours, unable to move. When Amanda returned home that evening, I was still there, surrounded by printouts of their emails. Her face shifted from surprise to anger to cold calculation in the span of seconds. At first, she attempted denial, claiming I had misunderstood or that the emails were not what they seemed. When faced with the evidence, her strategy changed. There was no remorse, no tears, not even the courtesy of an apology. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before and said, "We have grown apart, Fabian. I deserve to be happy." Those words echoed in my head for days afterward. The conversation that followed was surreal, like watching a stranger wear the face of the woman I had loved. She informed me that she wanted a divorce and expected half of everything we owned. When I pointed out that my company had been established before our marriage, she smiled thinly and said Washington is a community property state. Any growth during our marriage is considered joint property. I learned that she had been in contact with a divorce attorney for weeks. She had carefully documented what she called my workaholic behavior, creating a narrative that she had been emotionally abandoned while I pursued financial success. She had photographs of empty dinner tables where I was supposed to join her text messages, showing canceled plans, all building a case that our marriage had failed because of my neglect. The next day, Amanda moved out, not to her own apartment but directly into Jackson's downtown condo. Yet she maintained her demand for half of the company that I had built with my own hands, half of our home that I had largely paid for, and half of every investment and account we shared. Her attorney sent over initial paperwork that made my stomach turn, outlining her entitlement to assets she had never helped create. I called my friend Thomas, who had practiced family law before moving into corporate litigation. His assessment was grim. Washington state divorce laws indeed favored an equal split of assets regardless of who had earned them during the marriage. The fact that my business had grown significantly during our 7 years together meant she could claim a substantial portion of its value. The betrayal cut deeper than just the infidelity. Amanda had been documenting and planning this exit for months, maybe longer. She had crafted a narrative where I was the villain, the neglectful husband, who drove her to seek comfort elsewhere. Meanwhile, she had been systematically preparing to take half of everything I had worked for. I spent the first week after her departure in a fog of disbelief and despair. I barely slept, lost weight, and found it nearly impossible to focus on work. Friends called concerned about my silence and absence, but I could not bring myself to explain the humiliation I felt. How could I have been so blind? How could the person I trusted most betray me so completely? One night, after staring at the ceiling until dawn, I realized that wallowing in self-pity would solve nothing. Amanda had been calculating and strategic in her betrayal. I needed to be equally strategic in my response. This realization marked the turning point between being a victim and taking control of my situation. The next morning I called Thomas again, this time with a clear head and determination. If Amanda wanted war, I would not go down without a fight. Thomas referred me to Lauren, one of the top divorce attorneys in the city. Her consultation fee was steep, but her reputation for handling complex high-asset divorces made her worth every penny. While awaiting my appointment with Lauren, I began my own investigation. Reviewing our financial records, I discovered something alarming. Small transfers had been moving from our joint account to an unknown destination for months, always just under $5,000 perhaps, to avoid triggering any alerts. Over the past year, these transfers totaled nearly $60,000. Thomas helped me uncover the destination of these funds. A private account Amanda had opened at a different bank. This was money she had been siphoning from our joint resources, preparing her financial escape well before she physically left. This discovery gave me my first strategic advantage. I hired Samantha, a private investigator recommended by Lauren, to document Amanda's ongoing relationship with Jackson. While infidelity does not necessarily impact financial settlements in Washington, evidence of financial misconduct and the timeline of the affair could be valuable leverage. Samantha was thorough and discreet, providing photographs, video, and even public records, showing that Amanda and Jackson had been looking at real estate together months before our separation. My meeting with Lauren changed everything. Unlike Thomas, who had given me the standard legal perspective, Lauren specialized in finding the unique angles in each case. After reviewing the evidence I had gathered, she suggested a counter-strategy that focused on three key elements: the financial misconduct, the premeditated nature of the betrayal, and protecting my business assets. Lauren explained that while the growth of my company during our marriage could be considered community property, there were ways to demonstrate that Amanda had not contributed to this growth, and in fact had actively worked against it. This is where things took an unexpected turn. While organizing files from my home office, I found Amanda's old tablet that she had forgotten to take. It was logged into her cloud account, which contained conversations between her and Jackson discussing my company's proprietary software. She had been sharing confidential information about upcoming products, client lists, and expansion plans. Their messages revealed an intention to use this information to approach investors for a competing business once they had secured funds from our divorce. This was corporate espionage on top of marital betrayal. Lauren assured me that this evidence would significantly strengthen our position. She immediately filed for emergency orders to protect my intellectual property and business assets, along with a restraining order preventing Amanda from accessing any company information. Amanda's response was to escalate her demands and begin a subtle smear campaign among our mutual friends. She painted herself as the victim of a controlling husband who was now using his financial power to punish her for leaving an unhappy marriage. Some people believed her cutting ties with me, without ever hearing my side of the story. Rather than engaging in this emotional warfare, I channeled my energy into methodical preparation. Lauren advised me to avoid direct confrontation and let the legal process work. While Amanda was busy cultivating sympathy, I was building an airtight case. My friends Miguel and Jenna stood by me during this dark time. They had witnessed our marriage from the beginning and knew the truth of my character and dedication. Their support kept me grounded when I felt myself slipping into anger or despair. Miguel, who had gone through a difficult divorce himself, reminded me that maintaining dignity would serve me better in the long run than seeking vengeance. As the mediation date approached, Lauren and I prepared a comprehensive evidence package. It contained financial records showing Amanda's secret account documentation of her theft of company secrets and the evidence Samantha had gathered about the affair's timeline. We also included statements from business partners and employees about my role as the sole driving force behind the company's success. Throughout this process, I worked on myself as well. I started seeing a therapist to process the betrayal and rebuild my self-confidence. I returned to the gym, reconnected with friends I had neglected during my workaholic phase, and even started learning Japanese, something I had always wanted to do, but never made time for. These personal improvements were not just about healing, but about reclaiming my sense of identity outside of both my failed marriage and my company. The night before mediation, I felt a strange calm. I had done everything possible to protect what I had built. Whatever the outcome, I knew, I had stood up for myself, rather than becoming a passive victim of Amanda's manipulation. This realization was the first step in truly moving forward. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room at a downtown law firm. Amanda arrived with Jackson waiting in the lobby, a move that her attorney must have advised against, but that revealed her continued poor judgment. She looked confident, almost smug, as we took our places at the table. Her attorney began with an aggressive opening statement, outlining her entitlement to half of all marital assets, including a significant portion of my company. Lauren listened patiently, taking notes and showing no reaction to the inflated demands. When it was our turn, she calmly opened her evidence binder and began methodically presenting our case. First came the financial records, showing Amanda's systematic withdrawal of funds. Then the documentation of how she had provided Jackson with access to our properties without my knowledge. The mediator, a retired judge, maintained a poker face, but I could see Amanda shifting uncomfortably in her chair. Her confidence began to waver visibly. But the real turning point came when Lauren presented the evidence of corporate espionage, including timestamps and screenshots of confidential information Amanda had shared with Jackson. The color drained from Amanda's face. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear, clearly surprised by this revelation. They requested a break, during which I could see them engaged in intense discussion in a private room. When they returned, the attorney's approach had completely changed. Gone were the aggressive demands, replaced by a subdued tone and substantially reduced expectations. The final settlement was nothing like what Amanda had initially demanded. She received only the assets she had brought into the marriage, plus a modest cash settlement that was largely offset by the money she had already taken. My company remained entirely mine, protected by additional legal safeguards against future claims. The house was sold with proceeds divided according to original contribution, rather than equally. Most importantly, the settlement included confidentiality provisions and non-compete clauses that prevented both Amanda and Jackson from using any information they had obtained about my business. As we concluded the mediation, I felt no triumph, only relief that this chapter was closing. Amanda avoided my eyes as she signed the papers. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Jackson was nowhere to be seen when she left the building. A detail that Samantha later confirmed was because he had departed halfway through the day, apparently unhappy with the turn of events. 3 weeks later, I received a text message from Amanda. With the settlement finalized and the divorce nearly complete, she wanted to meet for coffee to talk. According to mutual friends, Jackson had ended their relationship shortly after the mediation, once it became clear that the financial windfall they had anticipated would not materialize. Now she suggested that perhaps we had both acted hastily and should consider reconciliation. I declined the meeting with a brief, polite message. The Amanda I had loved no longer existed in my mind, replaced by the person who had calculated my financial value and found me worthwhile only as a source of assets. That realization, while painful, was also freeing. I wished her well and asked her not to contact me again except through our attorneys. The healing process was neither quick nor linear. Some days I felt strong and forward-looking, while others brought anger or sadness that seemed as fresh as the day I discovered the affair. My therapist helped me understand that these fluctuations were normal part of processing a profound betrayal. The key was not to eliminate these feelings, but to acknowledge them without letting them dictate my actions. I sold our house, unable to live surrounded by memories of our life together. My new home was smaller but filled only with things that brought me joy. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones through a hiking club and language exchange group for my Japanese studies. Gradually, I reclaimed activities and interests that I had set aside during the years when work consumed me. My company continued to thrive, perhaps even more so as I implemented a healthier work-life balance. The crisis had forced me to delegate more effectively and build a stronger leadership team rather than trying to control everything myself. This unexpected benefit made the business more sustainable and less dependent on my constant presence. A year after the divorce was finalized, I took that trip to Japan that Amanda and I had always talked about. Traveling alone through Tokyo, Kyoto, and the rural countryside, I discovered a capacity for independence and adventure that had been dormant during my marriage. Each day brought new experiences that were entirely my own, untethered from expectations or compromises. The most important lesson from this painful chapter was learning to trust my instincts again. The red flags had been there, but I had ignored them out of love and trust. Now I understood that real love does not require blind faith, and genuine trust is built on actions rather than words or promises. I became more discerning about who I allowed into my life, valuing integrity above charm or convenience. I also learned that protecting yourself is not selfish, but necessary. The legal precautions, the careful documentation, the strategic response to Amanda's claims, all these were acts of self-preservation that I once would have considered too calculating or untrusting. Now I recognize them as forms of self-respect. Forgiveness came eventually not for Amanda's benefit but for my own. Carrying anger and resentment only kept me tethered to the past. Letting go did not mean excusing what she had done, but refusing to let it define my future. The greatest victory was not in the favorable settlement, but in reclaiming my life and identity. Sometimes losing someone who does not respect you is the beginning of finding yourself. The greatest revenge is not in bitter victory but in living well on your own terms. I had survived something that once seemed unsurvivable and emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentic than before. If you have experienced betrayal in your own life, what helped you move forward? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please subscribe and hit that like button to support more real-life stories that remind us we are never alone in our struggles. Thank you for listening. And remember, even the darkest chapters can lead to brighter beginnings when we find the courage to turn the page.